He came home with dust on his boots and hope in his chest, whispering Amy's name like a prayer he'd carried through the fire of war. But on that church porch, sunlight caught a ring on her finger, shining brighter than any metal he'd ever dreamed of. And standing beside her, Logan, like the world was his, was Mark, his own blood brother in spirit. Now the soldier who outran death finds himself fastened, a war no rifle can win, where silence cuts deeper than steel. Sit close, 'cause this tale don't march steady. The sun had just begun to dip low when Chris came home, his boots worn, his face marked with stories no one could see. He had been gone for years, swallowed by the call of war, carrying nothing but letters folded tight in his pocket. Letters from Amy. Sweet Amy, with her laughter like a bell on a Sunday morning, her voice soft as the wind slipping through the magnolia trees. Chris had dreamed of her in the trenches, whispered her name like a prayer when the night was too heavy to bear. He thought of her smile when the sky turned dark, thought of her hand when the earth shook with bombs. He told himself, if I make it home, she'll be mine. She has to be mine. But small towns have a way of changing while you're gone. Front porches get painted, children grow taller, and sometimes, promises never spoken drift into the arms of another. As Chris walked down the dusty road to the old town square, folks waved, shouted his name, and clapped his back. He smiled, though his heart was already running ahead, chasing the thought of Amy. He found her by the church, her hair lit by the evening sun. She turned, her eyes wide, her lips trembling between surprise and joy. Chris almost reached out to hold her. But then he saw the ring, a shining ring on her finger, catching the dying light. And standing beside her, tall and sure, was Mark, his best friend since boyhood. The world tilted, his chest tightened. Chris stood frozen, his smile cracked but still painted on his face. Mark came forward, arms wide, pulling him into a strong embrace. Brother, you made it home. You don't know how much I prayed for you. Chris hugged back, stiff, his eyes sliding to Amy. She wouldn't meet his gaze. Her hands twisted in front of her, the ring glinting like a cruel reminder. He wanted to ask, when? How? Why? But the words burned and never came. Mark's voice rolled on, warm and unknowing. I can't wait for you to stand by me at the wedding. You'll be my best man, of course. Who else could it be? He laughed, like it was the simplest truth in the world. The crowd that had followed Chris from the square gathered closer, clapping, whispering blessings. Chris stood tall, nodded, forced a laugh. Of course, brother. Of course. Inside, his chest was breaking. Every beat felt like a hammer, every breath like glass. He remembered the long nights overseas, clutching Amy's letters, believing they were his lifeline. He remembered the words she wrote. Kind words, careful words, but never love. Did she know? Did she ever guess? That night, back in his childhood room, Chris lay awake. The crickets outside sang, the old fan hummed, but he heard only the echo of Amy's laughter. He whispered her name again, just once, tasting the bitterness of it now. And he knew war had followed him home, not with guns, not with bombs, but with betrayal wrapped in silence. A test of the heart, fiercer than any battlefield. And Chris, strong as he was, did not yet know if he could survive this one. The days that followed were slow and heavy, like honey dripping too thick from the comb. Mark was everywhere, full of joy, dragging Chris from house to house, telling stories, planning the wedding. Folks called it a blessing. Two brothers reunited, one finding love, the other safe from war. But Chris carried a storm inside him. Each smile he wore was stitched with pain, each laugh a lie too loud. He tried to avoid Amy, but small towns leave no room for hiding. She was at the church, at the store, on the porch of Mark's house. Always near, always just out of reach. One evening, Amy found him alone by the riverbank. The water moved slow, carrying secrets with it. She stepped close, her voice soft, trembling. Chris, I didn't know if you'd come back. He looked at her, the hurt raw in his eyes. But you promised to wait. Her hands twisted in her dress. I promised to write. I promised to pray. But the days grew long, Chris. The nights longer. You didn't say the words I needed to hear. And Mark was here. Her honesty was a knife sharp, clean, undeniable. Chris turned away, staring at the water. I said the words, Amy. Maybe not to you, but to the stars, to the earth, to every bullet that missed me. I carried you with me. She touched his arm, light as a whisper. I cared for you, Chris. I still do. But it's too late. The ring is on my finger. He pulled back, every muscle tight, every breath heavy. Too late. The words dug deep. Too late. And in that moment, Chris knew he would have to choose. Bury his love like a soldier buries his dead, or fight the kind of war no man ever truly wins. The town buzzed with wedding fever. Women stitched lace, men polished shoes, children rehearsed songs. But beneath all the laughter and music, Chris carried silence, heavy as lead. Mark leaned on him often, trusting him with plans, secrets, dreams. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, Mark said one night, sitting on Chris's porch, sipping sweet. Chris swallowed hard, nodded, and forced a smile. The words he wanted to say burned his throat. She was my light before she was yours. But he stayed silent, a soldier bound by loyalty stronger than desire. Still, the nights gave him no peace. Amy haunted his dreams, her voice calling, her eyes searching. Sometimes, he thought he saw doubt in her gaze during the day, a flicker of something unspoken. But it vanished quick like smoke. The weight grew until Chris couldn't bear it. One late evening, he went to the church, empty and dim. He knelt in the last pew, his hands clasped, but no prayer would come. Instead, the words that spilled from him were broken. Why him? Why not me? Behind him, footsteps. He turned, and there she was again. Amy, pale in the candlelight, her eyes wet. You shouldn't be here, Chris said, his voice rough. I had to see you, she whispered. The wedding day drew near, and the air was thick with music, food, and whispers. Chris carried his best man's suit like armor, the weight of it pressing into his bones. Folks said he looked proud beside Mark, but they didn't see the storm in his eyes. Amy glided through the crowd, her white dress glowing, her smile soft but strained. Each step she took echoed in Chris's chest, pounding, pounding, pounding. At the altar, Mark beamed, his joy filling the room. Chris stood beside him, steady, though his hands trembled behind his back. When the preacher spoke, Chris barely heard. Every word blurred, every prayer tangled, until, does anyone here object? The silence that followed stretched long, too long. Chris felt his throat tighten, his heart rise. This was his moment, his chance to speak, to claim the truth. His eyes locked on Amy's, and in her eyes he saw it, the flicker, the plea, the love she had tried to bury. His mouth opened. The words were ready, but then Mark's hand found his shoulder, strong, trusting.